to Louisiana Republican Governor Bobby Jindal, who says states are making the tough decisions. It is the president who is not. Governor, very good to have you. What do you make of this? Again, to double down on the spending message.
Well, Neil, thank you for having me. Very disappointing speech. He could have delivered this speech in France. I mean, the one thing the president was right about is that this is an election about two clear choices. We can either go the European way or the American way. We can either grow government or grow the private sector. What was so disappointing was to hear the president talk about the need for even more government spending. You know, he had a very clever phrase in there. He talked about engaging in some nation building at home. It's a great political phrase, but it's very revealing. What it shows is this president, President Obama, continues to believe that government is the source of our prosperity. He couldn't be more wrong. Governors have been successful. Here in Louisiana, we've cut spending 26% in the government. We've got more people working than at any point in our state's history. Look at what President Obama has presided over. He's been president over 3 years. Over 500,000 fewer Americans working than when he took office. Unemployment of over 8% for 40 straight months. You look at median income for families. It is at a median net worth for families, 2-decade low. You look at wages, they haven't grown. Incomes have gone down. He has presided over an economic disaster. He literally cannot ask people, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? So instead of talking about his record, instead he has to just attack Governor Romney, and instead he has to try to distract us with this class warfare. 4 years ago it was hope and change.
But it must resonate.
Today,
but it must
divide
resonate, right? I mean, they must have their own tracking polls. I guess both sides hire these, fancy schmancy, advisors and the rest who must be saying this polls well, this populist appeal polls well, and certainly with that crowd, oddly, a partisan crowd, I grant you, as it would be at Mitt Romney's event, I guess. They feel that we do need more spending. You're saying we've reached the point where we just can't do that.
That's exactly right. And look, certainly he had a lot of great political lines in the speech, but what was so disappointing, in addition to the substance of the speech, which again, government's already 24% of our economy, a high when you look at norms post-World War II. He's talking about borrowing more money from China to grow government at the expense of the private sector. But what was even more disappointing than the substance was the tone. You had the president, the leader of the free world, blaming everybody for the mess that we are in today. It's not very presidential. Harry Truman wouldn't have recognized this. He understands that being president means that you're in charge. You've got to take responsibility. It sounded like to me like President Obama was trying to run against President Bush. He's 8 years too late for that. He needs to be talking about the future, not the past. It was very disappointing. You listen to that tone. You remember 2 years ago at this very spot, President Clinton said, give us 2 more years.
That's
we
right.
Can't fix this problem. Throw us out of office. 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, President Obama himself said, look, I'm going to fix this at the end of 4 years, otherwise I'll be a one-term president. He promised to cut the deficit in half. He hadn't done that. Promised to get unemployment below 8%. Hadn't done that. Promised to present a plan to reform entitlement programs. He hasn't done that either. He's made a lot of promises he hasn't kept. You're right. There was a lot of politically popular rhetoric.
But you mentioned Harry Truman. I mean, Harry Truman, of course, campaigned in 1948 against a do-nothing Congress, and that obviously worked for him. Of course, now it's not quite the same because there's only one branch of the legislative government that's in the other party's control. But having said that, I'm wondering whether Republicans risk getting sidelined as being sort of the anti-common man party. I think that's part of what was in the president's message today. I'd raised this issue when I talked to your counterpart in Wisconsin, Scott Walker, on the day of the recall, and he says that the president is missing a bigger theme here, and that he has a tin ear to these underlying developments, that taxpayers have had enough. What do you think of that?
I think Scott Walker is exactly right. I think that, look, President Obama is trying to divide us by gender, by race, by economic lines. He'll try to divide us any way he can to win this election. Governor Romney, listen to what he had to say, describing an aspirational society. Look, Neil, we as Americans, we don't want a European socialist-type government. We believe that our kids can do better than we did if they work hard. We know their last names, their circumstances of birth don't determine their outcomes as adults. We believe in an aspirational society. Governor Romney provided a positive, contrasting message today. Talked about on the first day as president, he's going to approve that Keystone Pipeline. He said he'd go build it himself, creating 100,000 jobs, by the way. He said he's going to repeal Obamacare. He said that also he was going to go back and review all those government regulations, nearly 10 new regulations every day. By the way, SBA is estimated when you look at the cost of regulations, $10,000 per manufacturing job in this country. It's one of the reasons jobs are going to go overseas. Governor Romney talks about flattening the tax code. We now have the highest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world, filled with loopholes. President Obama continues to support crony-style capitalism, supporting Solyndra and companies like that. You heard today he wanted to double down on special government fees.
I tell you, Governor, you're good. You got all this stuff down. I guess the bigger question for me, when I step back from this, Governor, you're much more closely attuned and up on this stuff than I am, but I think it's going to be a choice between more government or less. It comes down to that. You want to pay for more government or don't you? And you make a very compelling argument for easing that up a bit. A lot of Mitt Romney's critics say he has not as effectively closed that argument. How do you think he should do so?
Well, Neil, first of all, I do think he's doing a great job providing that contrast. I think you're exactly right. This election is about two very different directions for America. It's not about personalities, who looks good on TV, who gives the best speech. It's about two very different visions. Do we have a larger federal, more expensive federal government that intrudes in our daily lives, that spends record amounts of money and mortgages our children's future? And that's what we've seen under President Obama, $1 trillion-plus deficits every year, $15 trillion accumulated debt, record-setting levels of debt compared to GDP for peace times, versus Governor Romney. When he was governor of Massachusetts, unemployment lower than the national average, per capita income grew faster than the national average, top 10 states in terms of turning around the economy. So he's got a different vision for America. He's got a much better track record. President Obama can't ask the American people, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Can't run on his track record. He's going to have to try to distract us, divide us. He's going to try to shift blame to everybody but himself. The American people are smarter than that. We want a real leader. We want somebody who understands we live in an aspirational society. We want our children to have a better quality of life than we've done. Listen to this. Over half of American college kids, as they're graduating, are now unemployed or underemployed. 23 million Americans unemployed or underemployed. This is now the new normal under President Obama. We, the American people, know the private sector is not fine despite what the president says. We know this is not a recovery. We know we can do better. He's had 3.5 years. He has been president of the United States. It's time for him to stop blaming others and admit his policies haven't worked. Instead, he's doubling down on more government spending.
Well, Governor, I'm going to take a leap here and put you down as a no on the president, all right?
Thanks, Neil.
It's always good seeing you, sir. Thank you very, very much. Governor